Welcome back to another episode of IT Mythbusters, where we explore some of the key topics of the day and really determine whether a topic is a myth or not. I'm here with my good friend Suresh, and as always, we're going to be exploring hot topics. And today, Suresh, I think our topic for this episode number 8 is a fun one. It's one we've all been dealing with for a little while. It's the topic of the Great Resignation. And I think the question that we're going to talk about today really is the Great Resignation over?
That's a brilliant topic, Mike. Thanks for, again, setting up this episode. So let's dive a little about what is the Great Resignation for people. As you know, since the pandemic started off in 2020, we have seen the talent getting a lot more importance, and people have shifted jobs. They have multiple offers, and it's been a real big problem for the last couple of years to retain talent. So the Great Resignation started off eventually from the US and has just gone all over the globe. So there's a huge demand for people or talent that people are looking out for greater opportunities. And my question is, we are already out of pandemic. So does that mean that our Great Resignation is over? Because now we are kind of coming back to workplaces, if not fully, but at least on a hybrid model.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Suresh, I think if we look at the core of why the Great Resignation started, right? I think there's a confluence of forces. One, I would say that we had obviously the pandemic made people take a step back and reevaluate what was important to them, right? And so a lot of people looked at work and said, okay, what's really important to me about my job? I've been just kind of on this hamster wheel for years and years and years. But now when I'm faced with the reality of a global pandemic, when I'm faced with the reality of, well, I might not make it through the month, right, because of the fear that we were all facing at that time. I think it made us all think about life a little bit differently, think about what was important a little bit differently. So I think that was one key component of why people started having this sort of conversation. The second, obviously, was the economic impact of the pandemic and the fact that it kind of pushed a lot of people out of the workforce, right? Due to the dramatic impact on small businesses, on different elements of the economy, like the restaurant industry and things like that. There were just major groups of people that almost overnight were without a job, right?
Sure.
And again, that made people reevaluate. The last thing that I think kind of plays into the conversation is that we had a whole wave of folks in the baby boomer generation that really were looking at this and saying, you know what, I was thinking I was going to work a little bit longer, but given all these other factors, maybe now's the right time for me to retire. And so from a baby boomer perspective, we had a whole bunch of people that kind of purposefully and on of their own accord retired and walked out of the workforce. And then finally, the last factor that kind of goes in here, and this is the morbid piece of this, right? We lost a lot of people during COVID. We lost people of all ages, of all races, of all sexes, and everything. And so we lost a lot of people in the workforce. So there were a lot of different elements that kind of all led to what we started to see. And I think now, as we look back, as we're hopefully kind of learning to live with COVID and we're out the other side of the pandemic, now we're starting to hopefully normalize. But now the question is there a new normal when it comes to expectations around a job? Is there a new normal when it comes to expectations around how long I stay at a job? And I think that kind of will lead us to the answer to our question is the Great Resignation over, or is it still going on?
Now, you've made a great point, Mike, around the expectations. So just as you know, Elon Musk, for example, had made it mandatory. If you're not going to be in the job or you don't show up, it says that you have resigned, and we have done that. And it has just caused a lot more repercussions in the market. And we've seen a lot of people laid off from Tesla for the part that they decided that everybody have to show up into the office. So does it also ring a bell in terms of organizations now struggling to bring in the right level of expectations, considering people have been in this world, and they probably start controlling how they want to be employed in an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, when I see some of like what Musk is doing, I kind of ask the question to myself: is this a real perspective, or is this grandstanding an excuse?
Right.
Right? Did Musk actually have to make layoffs, and now he wants an excuse for people to walk out their door on their own accord, rather than him being the bad guy? Right. And I wonder how much of that is going on in this particular situation. But I think you raise a great point. The layoffs are not just happening at Tesla and Twitter.
No.
Right. Layoffs are happening all over the place.
Right.
And particularly in the startup world,
yeah,
where money's getting a little bit tighter, access to capital is getting a little bit tighter. Startups that had kind of big, grandiose plans are now starting to realize, well, maybe it's a little bit tougher market than I thought. Maybe I need to rethink those plans a little bit. And they're starting to kind of reposition how they go forward. I think that's a really interesting element of it. It's hard to say that we're still in a midst of a great resignation and people are resigning of their own accord when all the layoffs are happening, right?
Right.
But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think people are still kind of going through this thought process, this great resignation?
No, in my opinion, I think it is far from being over, because I think we have just got to the inflection point that we are trying to figure it out, the new norm, as you said, setting the right expectations. I think you have to give a little more time, Mike, for this whole market to start understanding how things are working. Because at one end, we are talking about hybrid models. The other teams are talking about setting realistic expectations of how many hours I'm going to work. Is it going to be the same way of my roles going to be relevant? Is it going to change? So I think we still are too far from, in my opinion, from the great resignation. So we have just touched the other side of the spectrum, but there's a lot more moving parts, in my opinion, to get in order before we can say this is all done.
Well, I know my network is fairly tech heavy when I think about it, but I can tell you, just as one anecdotal data point, I go out to LinkedIn every day, and when I visit LinkedIn, I'm seeing every single day 5 to 10 people from my network who are announcing new opportunities, new jobs.
Right.
They're moving on to that next new thing. I've seen it from my extended network. I've seen it from my local network. I've seen it across the board. And I think, quite frankly, as I have talked to the people that I know that have kind of gone through that, what I've seen over and over and over again is people who are leaving because either A, there's just this really amazing opportunity out there. They liked where they're at, but an amazing opportunity. Or there's this really big financial upside, 20, 30, 50% more than what they're making today, to the point where they really couldn't pass on that. Or even in some cases, still some people that are kind of looking at where they're at and saying, you know what, I'm really realizing that this company doesn't align with what's important to me.
Right.
They're not as focused on, say, ESG factors, or they're not as focused on diversity factors, or the culture isn't as aligned to to my own personal beliefs as what I thought it was.
Right.
Right. I am seeing more of that as I talk to people than I've ever seen.
Exactly.
So to your point, I mean, it's not slowing down in my world. It's not slowing down from the people I talk to.
Right.
So I don't think it's over yet. I think we still got a pretty long runway before it's over. I think it's going to change because I do think the economic situation that we're in here in the US or in other parts of the globe, I think is going to impact how people view that. I think as people start to fear inflation more and more, as they start to look at their economics, they're going to be a little bit less risk averse.
Right.
Or a little bit more risk averse, I should say.
Yeah.
And changing a job is always risky, right?
Yep.
The grass is, as we always say, the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side of the fence.
Right.
So I do think you'll see a little bit of a slowdown, but I think I don't know what you think about this. I think some basic expectations around what people are looking for in jobs. I think some basic expectation around cultural norms around how long you need to stay at a job, and some other things have been completely reset. And I don't know that we come back from that. I don't know that this slows down.
Yeah, so I think that's the right thing. So in summary, I think we are seeing a renewed focus on people being very particular about the purpose, the cultural norms. What do I get in by spending my time in this organization? Do I have the right level of psychological safety? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? At the end of the day, work is just one part of my life. Am I making my work integrate with my values, my principles, my purpose in life, and what I want to do? And that is all being a very important question to answer. So with that said in mind, Mike, I would say that we bust this myth, and the great resignation is not yet over. It is going to change in dimensions. So keep a watch out of it, and probably we might cover this in a few episodes later as we start to progress through this journey.
Yeah, we'll have to come back to this in a year and see if it's over yet. But I agree with you. It's not over yet. We got a ways to go.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this edition of IT Mythbusters. So stay tuned for our next episode to follow in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much.
Have a great one.